Hi, I am Jessica Ardeal with Lynn Misch. Welcome to Own Your Healthcare. And we wanted to check in today. Lynn, you and I were texting this morning, right? I'm just going to talk to you like we were before, and we were texting about different things coming up. I just got some lab work back, and I think it's always good to have a baseline in numbers. And even though I do energy work and rely heavily on that intuitive side for how I'm owning my healthcare. I think it's helpful to get that idea. So I was running numbers by you with your background, and it was interesting. You were asking about, well, how long was I having certain expressions? And I said, well, honestly, it's been years, but I have, as you suggested, the element of denial, right, when it comes to healthcare, which ties into our mental health, how we're thinking and approaching things about how our body's presenting, how we're dealing with it, and ignoring it is not a solution. Those famous 5 words, maybe it'll go away, can really kill you. So with that, we're infusing humor here, right? So with that being said, Lynn, in your experience too, when it comes to wrapping our mind around healthcare and really the gravity of it, it's a life or death topic and situation, right? So how can we infuse some fun into that?
Well, I think it's interesting because I worked in a lot of critical care units, a lot of cardiac units, that type of thing. And I can remember, I'd answer call lights and, part of your job as a nurse is to answer a call light because the patient needs something. So you go in the room and it was a relief when they wanted you to change the channel on the TV because they couldn't figure out how to do it. But the other thing that oftentimes happened with that call light is that they were having a cardiac event, which we were monitoring them and doing that type of thing. But they may be having chest pain or something else was occurring. And what I aptly coined that as is life can literally change in a heartbeat. And so I think it's important and again, the education comes from understanding the the different characteristics of diseases and what the body's actually trying to do. It was funny this morning. A funny little side note is that I went to have a drink of water and I have a bedside stand. And when I went to reach for my water, I found my TV remote in my, my water glass. And I'm like, oh,
Was there still water in the glass?
it was in the water, in the glass. And I took it out and I'm thinking, this is how we function as human beings, right? I mean, we do these crazy things. And I took it out because I wanted a drink of water and I took it out and I thought, well, I'll have, and then and I thought, well, that's nuts because you have got, this thing has batteries in it. There's battery acid in it. There's all this kind of stuff. Are you really?
You're thirsty.
And so I'm thinking, what? Stop the man. So I get a Kleenex, I wrap it around the remote. And so the remote is now taken apart with the batteries out. I didn't drink the water. I threw that in the sink, put that way. And I'm thinking, I mean, this is in moments.
Good morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello. And so this is how we function. I mean, not everybody functions like that, maybe, but I think.
Are you waking up with your TV remote in your water?
Yeah,
This might be for you.
So you think about the craziness of things that we do. I mean, I've got a boatload of stories of the oopses that we have, but when you think about the human condition and trying to figure all of this out,
Right.
it's just, I mean, that's just one little blurb in the day that, and you could go on, who knows what's the adventures that are going to happen in the rest of the day, right? Because you just don't ever know when the day unfolds what's going to go on. And as my screen keeps flipping in and out of this, you see this little picture in the side of me, and which is a quilt that my dear friend made me that's sitting on the back of the chair that I'm sitting in. That's quite lovely. But when you do Zoom, we get to pick these wonderful
I
background.
like your journey path to the
Yeah.
mountains.
Well,
It
and
speaks
this is,
volumes to what you do every day and have done for students and patients for so long. And I think it's really important to honor that part that you've dedicated your life to, that it's definitely the way of being, right? So in owning your healthcare too, you've had an extra immersive level of what that means. And I think it's so fascinating to hear your stories and how life still happens, even though we know what we know and can do what we do, right? There's always going to be that variable element of the unknown that can surprise us at any moment. Even if we've been getting signals along the way. So yeah.
and it's a journey into the wilderness, right? And it's interesting because this is a legit, we were talking before, this is a legitimate picture from one of my great adventures because I love to travel. And I was traveling with a group of friends and we were out in Colorado. And on this, it doesn't show on this picture, but there's a sign, a wooden sign that's inscribed on a wood pole that says into the wilderness. And when you think about living our lives, that's basically what we're doing is we're going into this great adventure into the wilderness, right? And so whatever that may be, if it's heading to a beach or the great beautiful serenity that's sitting behind you in that ocean of water, or we're heading into the mountains or whatever it is, and the adventures in our life. And hopefully we view it as an adventure because this is a lifetime of hopefully gifts, and sometimes when we get faced with challenges, which oftentimes when we get faced with a challenge, we've got, again, choices about where that challenge is going to take us. And one of the first things that happens is I think we flip into, it's going to go away. It didn't happen. It's not happening. We're not, this isn't real. If I mean, is this really in my water glass, this remote that I put in there? Somewhere along the way, because I've got a little holder next to that and missed the holder. So it's like we have all of these different things that happen as human beings, these encounters, and I think it's lessons in living, right? I mean, that's what we're doing and that's why we're creating this program, is to hopefully give lessons in living and lessons in how to live better, how to make choices about the opportunities that we can embrace and process in our journey in this lifetime. And there's a lot of information out there. I mean, when you tap into the internet, I mean, it's like, and you have to be very careful about where you're going and what you're really looking at, because there is everybody talking about everything and everybody's an expert in today's world, right? And so it's hard to decipher and sort through the information. And so it's interesting. And I think that's why, sharing these topics, engaging with others really helps to open up different dialogues. We learn from each other, right? Whenever
And
I,
that brings it, oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but
no, you're fine.
the question is, with everybody being an expert, is there a level of irresponsibility in inviting someone to own their healthcare? And there's a lot of people that could argue that, but what we're creating is that community of like-minded individuals that know that, yes, I have a responsibility in how I'm taking care of myself and how I'm presenting my health when I do present to my medical team of professionals. There were a couple things you just touched on that I wanted to just acknowledge too. When you talked about going into the wilderness, it just reminds me of how we have the opportunity here. What Own Your Healthcare to me means is connecting with that organic nature of the body and getting back to nature. And I think we get fooled a lot by modern technology and conveniences that we're not out in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness and we still have to survive, right? And survival now more than ever is coming into huge focus. And there's a lot of struggle in a lot of different ways. So owning your healthcare is getting back to the basics of what you can do. And for me, it's just sometimes simple as air, water, sunshine, right? Am I having enough water? Am I breathing consciously? Am I getting that sunlight and really feeding into just some basics? It doesn't have to be a complicated, complex system that we're integrating, right? There's small little things that can be enough. And when we acknowledge our body on that little level, there's like a little spark of like, ooh, you know, that conscious connection that happens for me anyway. And when I work with that level of nonverbal communication of the body, I tell you, I was thinking about how I would describe myself as nonverbal in a way, because if I'm not here, I'm not going to be talking. There's a level, and I don't know why I'm bringing this up right now, but this is what's coming out of my mouth. And so go with me here for a minute. But the piece of some of the best conversations I have are when we're not talking. And there's that piece of just highlighting what's important and then recognizing again, it's really the little things that matter. And oftentimes I leave big chunks of the story out where it really fits everything together. And that's why I love talking to you, Lynn, because you always bring it back together for me too. But that's just a thing, is our body is in a nonverbal state of communication constantly. And sometimes really simple things can impact its performance. So owning your healthcare can be really simple.
I think it can, and it's like kind of like putting the pieces in a puzzle, right?
And just deciding
Um,
to own your healthcare, right?
right, right. Well, that's a huge decision.
Just
I mean,
decide.
that's the piece that I think is probably one of the most powerful pieces of all, is to really make that decision about, I am going to do this. I am going to take responsibility for this, and I'm going to start to connect to something. I think a lot of what happens is we're not connected to this I like the term avatar that we're walking around in, right? We really are not connected to it and don't understand it, and we don't take the time to understand it, or really, it's like I was teaching blood pressures to in asking about blood pressures to a group of people. I was in a community or in a company and teaching about blood pressures and what those numbers mean. What does the top number mean? What does the bottom number mean? Because you go to the doctor and you get a blood pressure taken, right? And as they tell you the numbers, they tell you 134 over 82, right? And so,
Or
okay,
sometimes they say you're good. Like, okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're like, and so I asked the question, what do those two numbers mean to you? So, and then it was really interesting, the responses. And so it was an opportunity to open the doors to education about what those two numbers actually mean and what they're doing to the body when you start to discover that they have meaning, they have a purpose, they're regulating a system. And so, and it really is telling you about how the heart is beating and how it's relaxing, and your stress levels. It's all different kinds of things. And so it can tell you that there may be something going on in your heart because it's not relaxing enough on that bottom number. But it's interesting when you start to ask those questions, and and then all of a sudden your numbers will be running high, and you got to have come back for a series of revisiting that blood pressure, and then all of a sudden you're on a medication, right? Well, that's great, except do you know why that you all of a sudden you're on this medication? Why are you on this medication? And what is it doing for your body? And what else can you be doing for your body to make decisions about helping your body? Because all of a sudden there's a sign that something's going on, that it's not quite functioning like it should be, right? It's like the blood work that you talked about when we first started. There's numbers, there's parameters within everything, and they all mean something. And and oftentimes I'll get calls from different people, and they'll be asking me about numbers and that type of thing. And so those numbers all have a meaning, right? And they're connected to different systems. And so when you look at an overall interpretation of those numbers and how it connects to the body, it can tell you a lot about where the body's at, right? So it's interesting, but I think that's where it's really giving the people that are really going to come into owning your own health care and understanding, right? You're going to bridge that gap, and hopefully create a greater awareness of the connection that we have to this being that we're walking around in, right? Because I think that we really are. It's like the gentleman that hurt his heartbeat after having heart surgery. and really didn't really connect to it until he had a major intervention. And now he's connecting to it because it's off, or somebody that has kidney disease or whatever it is. It's like me with having breast cancer. I mean, I walked around, I've nursed babies. I've got 2 kids, they both nursed, and I breastfed, and and it's like so you have these 2 parts of your body in women that are, and how they're perceived. That's the other thing. When we when we look at the perception of the image of what a woman's supposed to be, or how we're supposed to be as a human being, that all we're bombarded by all of these images, right? Of we're supposed to be a certain way, and how that distorts the image of who we are because we're not connected to, rather than looking at, the ideal images of all these different individuals. Where is the connection to that image and your health? Right? I mean, that's the important part, is that we can have this image of what we're supposed to be looking like, a model or all these different things. And there's a disconnect between that image and our own healthcare.
And
Because,
again, tying in that mental element, right? How we're
yeah,
perceiving what health is. And that's defined differently for different individuals until it's redefined for them, right? So like owning your healthcare again is an invitation to define and be open to redefining on your own terms what that can mean, a continuous evolution of possibility. There's no box, right? Like that story you share, Lynn, of being on the line and you're like, you're not keeping me in a chalk box on the floor. I don't know if you want to tell that story now,
yeah,
but
that's one of my favorite stories. That's what got me into nursing, because that was I was a single mom and I was looking for a job, and I ended up going down to this factory in Illinois, and it was a China factory. And so I'm thinking, and I got the job, and I walked away from it. I'm thinking, they didn't even interview me. They didn't ask me who I was. They just hired me. I'm like, okay, I'm going down to this job, and they're putting different restrictions on, when you can go to the bathroom, all these different crazy things. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I can, I have to drive 20 minutes. I'm drinking a cup of coffee. By the time I get there, I got to go to the bathroom. May have to, whatever, it doesn't matter. But there were these restrictions. And then I was at the time a long distance runner for years. And I would go home at night because I'm standing on a cement floor. And I'd go home at night and I'd look at my legs and I'm thinking, doggone it, the veins in my legs are getting like big or blown up or something. They didn't look right. And I'm thinking, well, I'm standing on the cement floor. This can't be good for me, because it just can't be good for me. So I started walking back and forth on the cement floor. I'm scraping china, walking back and forth on the cement floor. And the supervisor walks over to me and he says, "What are you doing?" And I looked up at him and I said, "I'm doing my job." And he kind of looked at me a little in disgust, and he turned around, he went away, and he came back with a piece of orange chalk. This is a true story. And he literally drew a big orange box around me and told me not to step outside the lines. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, I always tell my nursing students this: you always step outside the lines because you're working with people. Anyway, I was fired in a very short period of time for insubordination. Hello. And while I was on this line, I was negotiating with the higher power, saying, what do you really want me to do? So I went out to a community college and I looked at their curriculum, and I saw a nursing program and it was clinically based. And I thought, I'll do that. There's no math. So that it launched me into a whole educational process. And I'm grateful for it, because I've had an amazing career working with literally thousands of people in the past 40 years. And I am incredibly grateful. But it was that not being in a box. And so, yes, this program is about maybe not being in that box.
And speaking of math too, the body is communicating mathematically, right? When we talk about the numbers, when we talk about that, there's different ways we can communicate with the body that has to do with the internal communication. And I'm really excited to dive into the master class coming up And I want to invite you to also take a stand, whether you join us or not, to own your healthcare, define what that means for you, and creating the opportunity for more options for the generations to come, right? Creating a new generation of health consciousness so that we're not in a box. There are things we can do to go beyond. And I really appreciate taking the time today with you, Lynn, as always. Is there anything else you want to share before we go?
No, I just think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be, I think, learning is fun and sharing is fun. It can be fun. I think that it can be, I always learn from other people. I always learn different, when you share a story, when you share, it's amazing what we all have a story. We're living a life, we have stories. And so sharing those stories are opportunities, I think, to expand into the human consciousness, to expand into an awareness and sensitivity to the other person and to ourselves. And so I've learned a lot from engaging with all different kinds of folks, whether I'm educating or whether I'm caring for. It's been an intriguing process, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to have people join us and hopefully have some fun with this and learn, because I think learning is fun. And so, and it's a lifelong journey, which is the intriguing part about it, right? It doesn't stop. So,
I
um,
appreciate you taking the time, Lynn, and contributing to my journey, and heart to heart hugs to you and everyone listening. We'll see you again soon, and join us for the Own Your Healthcare Master Class.
yay! Bye.
Bye for now.